Hey guys, thanks as always for checking out another one of my battle reports. This was another pretty interesting game with Tau. I have been getting a little bit of, I wouldn't say hate, but less than desirable reactions for playing Tau. It's kind of confusing to me. I would consider Tau to be in generally a bit of a bad spot. Um, they have two lists that are pretty competitively viable, that being the one that I'm playing, Commander Spam, and also Hammerheads with Long Strike Spam, and then still taking like some screening stuff with Kroot Hounds and all that. But they don't really have many good options for quite a few reasons. Most of those are the marker light chart being kind of bad. Um, that's probably the biggest one, actually. I think Tau would be a really good army if they just move the +1 ballistic skill result to like 3 marker lights, and then shuffled some other things around. But that's neither here nor there. So this game was a little weird. Obviously, my opponent's list was a little illegal. The Contemptor Dreadnought can take a Havoc launcher, but not a Greater Havoc launcher, which is very different because a regular Havoc launcher does not do nearly the work that the Greater Havoc launcher was doing in this game, since it was wounding everything that it was shooting on 2s, and my opponent was playing it as 2d3 shots. It's actually 3d3 shots, so I can see why that's not really a gun that they just give out to everybody, because that's actually super powerful, especially with ignoring line of sight. And then there was also an instance at the end of the game where Necrosius gave +1 to hit in the fight phase to the Plague Marines, which they don't get because they don't have the tainted keyword. But that's okay. So this was probably it wasn't as one-sided as it looked. I did end up losing a lot of commanders, but I think a lot of that was through my own play and not really so much just like naturally happening as the game went along. So if you look at a lot of the pictures from the game, my gun drones were kind of next to commanders a lot. I deployed them all in the front when they came down initially, but after that they were either dying or my commanders were outpacing them a little bit. I think in the future I need to be running the gun drones a lot, unless I'm facing against like a Hordes army or something. I was shooting with them a lot this game, and that's just not very important. Plague Marines are not the kind of target that gun drones want to be shooting into. They only win them on 4s. They're still, of course, hitting on 5s unless you have a marker light to help them out. And then the Plague Marines get a 3+ save, 2 if they're in cover, and then they also have Feel No Pain. So the math on that is just not very good, and I should have been treating them purely as extra wounds. Similarly, I should have been doing the same thing with the Fire Warriors. They don't. Again, they have pretty much the same gun. They hit slightly better, but that's not really anything to write home about. So I should have been running them as well to keep them in front of the commanders, not only as charge screens, but also to just abuse the character rule. And that's something I think I could have recognized a little bit better in the game, is really abusing that character rule and saying, okay, some of these units in my army aren't very worthwhile against this particular opponent because he doesn't have any like chaff or lower end infantry that I can shoot at. So I just need to work on making sure my commanders are nice and safe, because they're going to win me the game. They're always going to win me the game, but against armies that are maybe a little more mixed arms or a little more horde style, like orcs or Tyranids or something, the basic gun drone shooting and fire warriors and all that can do good work. That's just not what I was going up against this game. So that's probably my biggest takeaway, is that I shouldn't have lost as many commanders as I did. Losing the 2 in the middle from shooting on that one turn was entirely avoidable. I don't think they were the closest target anyways, but it was pretty close, and since I was at that point essentially going to win the game no matter what, I just gave it to my opponent in the interest of like having a more interesting game. But I should have had guys just in front of them blanketly to make it so that they couldn't be shot. Same thing with the towards the end of the game on my left flank, where I had the 4 commanders in the combat. I should have used the Kroot Hounds to be like a smite screen to prevent charges, stuff like that. They didn't really have much to do this game. Their typical role is to defend me against like deep strike and then also absorb charges. The only deep strike that my opponent had was obliterators, who are a shooting unit, and there wasn't really many charges I could defend them from, because my commander was on a tower, and the Demon Prince could just fly over the Recruit Hounds, and then I just didn't have them in position to block the other Demon Prince. Luckily, that worked out for me. The Demon Princes with one Malefic Talon is not good. There's really no reason to ever run a Demon Prince with anything but 2 Malefic Talons. Everything else is pretty much strictly worse. The other options, like you get -2 hit penalties and stuff like that. The Warp Bolter is pretty crappy, especially on something that wants to be in combat all the time. Just take the 2 Malefic Talons, get a boatload of attacks for almost no points, enjoy your low-cost Psyker who moves 12 inches and is a complete house in close combat. And if you're playing Nurgle, which, I mean, if you're playing to win, the Demon Princes should pretty much always have Marker Nurgle, because it has a good lore and Feel No Pain is amazing. Then they have Feel No Pain as well, so they're very, very difficult to take out. People are starting to catch on to that in my local area. People are playing like 3, 4, 5 Demon Princes in a list, so that's something I expect to see more of. Yeah, overall the game was pretty straightforward. Once again, as I said several times in the report, I was denied from really utilizing my Deep Strike the way I like or want to by playing on a deployment that is lengthways instead of width. So that is relevant because 2 of the 6 deployment types do that, and it's very easy to keep my commanders out of the more valuable parts of the opposing army, just by like giving them some, chaff or something like that to have to deal with. The obliterators kind of filled that role this game. They pushed up, and although they got killed for it, they prevented me from getting into the dreadnoughts and the plague marines, which is what I was more worried about. I mean, I did want to kill the obliterators too, but I couldn't get in range to the other stuff. So that's something I have to definitely watch with this army. The hope is that I can thin out some of that stuff turn 1 with the army if I have to, the non-commander portions of the army, but in reality the commanders are going to come down on turn 1 most of the time because they have to. So it's just a weakness of the list the way I've built it, because all my guys have 18-inch range guns. It just is what it is. I could give them missile pods, but I just don't think missile pods are worth it for multiple reasons. So just something I have to learn to deal with. That means I have to make sure I deploy really well, make sure that my commanders are nice and protected, because what I'm going to kill on turn 1 is often not going to be all the things that I need to kill, especially in the length or the deployment types like I played in this game. In the other deployment types like Dawn of War or Table Quarters, something like that, it's a lot easier and it's a lot harder to defend, and your tanks or your devastators or whatever have you with your army, but it's still possible if you push really far back. But in this game I couldn't even push them really far back, which would have made the scenario a little bit easier on me. Speaking of the scenario, I really like the ITC scenario. This is my first time playing the Combined Arms pack. I've played the variants in the past, so like just their variants for the core rulebook missions. Those are much better than the core rulebook ones are, just because of the +1 to go first instead of auto go first alone. But these missions are really good. I think they have a lot of good balancing features. So like, for example, destroy a unit is 2 of the results on the mission that we played, and I have a ton of 2-man gun drone units, so it's very difficult for me to prevent my opponent from getting that one, and that's a weakness of the army. Most people would say Commander Spam is a very strong list. I think it's probably like a tier 2 list. Tier 1 is like the really, really egregious armies, but Commander Spam is definitely very powerful, so that kind of puts like a slight ding on that, which is good. I think that's a good thing. Unfortunately, it doesn't do much for the super egregious lists, apart from maybe making like Razorwing Flock and Brimstone Horror is a little bit sad, but I mean, kill 1 unit a turn is not too scary against like Storm Ravens and Razorback Spam and that kind of stuff. But it's a process. The missions are very fun. I would have preferred to play one that has more objective scoring. This one only has there's 2 objectives you can score. There's 2 results to destroy a unit, and there's a result to have 3 units in your deployment zone with none of your enemies, and then there's a result to have any of your guys within your enemy's deployment zone. So I prefer the ones where it's like 4 results of score this objective, like 1 deployment zone thing and 1 destroy a unit. Most of the missions are like that. This one is just a little, they're all a little different. So that was kind of boring because most of the time we were just getting destroy a unit and do other thing that's very easy to do. But some of that was down to the list we were playing and all that stuff, so I certainly am not going to knock the mission pack for that. I think overall they're really good, and these are my favorite missions that I've read. The other good missions are the Nova open missions. Those are, I think, a little too complex, especially for like more casual play. They're fine if you're going to like a really large tournament, which is what they're intended for. They're written by the Nova team who runs the Nova Open, but you have to like pick a lot of, okay, I'm going to do this objective, okay, I'm going to do this objective, and it gets a little cumbersome to do all the bookkeeping. So I think the ITC guys have struck a better balance for something that does work well for even very competitive events, but also works fine if you're just playing, somebody at the local store and you want to get up and go. That's what we did. This game took, I think, 2 hours. 2 hours starting with deployment, so we booked it. That's another thing I've been really liking about my Tau versus my Orcs. Even though I can play Orcs pretty fast, that's one of the things I get a lot of the time when I post battle reports for them, is like, how can you finish this army's game in like 2.5 hours or 3 hours, something like that. But the Tau move really quickly. They don't have to move as many guys, which really speeds things up. Shooting is a lot faster than resolving combats. Combats just take forever. You have to like pile everybody in. You have to count up the number of attacks. I usually end up rolling a ton of dice because I'm playing Orcs. Things like that. A lot of armor saves because I don't have any AP on most of my attacks, whereas with my Tau I can actually strip AP off people. It's just a lot quicker. And then the Deathguard army was very elite as well, so my opponent's turns were moving very quickly. That's something I really like, is playing a smaller army, not just my Tau, but playing a little bit more of a medium or elite-sized army, so that I can kind of get through my turns quicker, get through the game quicker. When it's sped up, it's more enjoyable in my opinion. I like playing faster games so that you can get maybe an additional game in that day, or you can just go do something else or whatever, and then the game's done one way or the other, instead of having to like grind out a game for like 3 or 4 hours, which has happened to me several times with Orcs, due to my own army being huge and then my opponent's army being kind of either bad or them making bad decisions, and none of my models dying, so I just had to keep moving all these models, keep fighting with all these models. I don't think that would ever happen in like a more competitive setting. People are going to be able to gun down at least a unit of Orcs a turn, but that's not the case for everybody that you play. So I think the Tau army that I'm playing is really good. I wouldn't make any changes to it after playing it just a couple times. I'm going to get a more of a feel for it. I do think it's going to have problems as comp becomes more popular. So if you're not really plugged into the 40K competitive scene, the comp is where you're either disincentivized or outright banned from taking certain things. So it might be like a unit that you can't take, it might be a quantity of units, something like that. All of the major events and even most small events are being won right now by a very small amount of lists that invalidate a huge amount of lists. So like the most egregious one is 5 to 7 Storm Ravens with buffing characters like either Gilliman to give them all reroll hits and wounds, Azrael plus a Dark Shroud to give them like a 4+ invulnerable save and -1 to be shot at. Yeah, so that's a big one. 3 Knights plus Magnus or Gilliman is another big one. There's some spam armies going around, like Brimstone Horrors and Razorwing Flocks, just abusing guys that are 2 points, while the rest of your army, does all the killing, and your opponent can just never get through the like 200 to 300 models you brought to the table. It's just not going to happen. So stuff like that is a really big problem right now, and it's being discussed by the larger TOs within 40K what to do about that. So there's a couple popular suggestions out there floating right now. One of them is to prevent you from taking more than 3 of any single datasheet unless it's a troop or a dedicated transport. So you can't take 5 Storm Ravens, you can only take 3 Storm Ravens. one of them is to not allow you to take more than one of a particular detachment, unless it's a patrol battalion or I think it's a platoon is the really big one. That would shut down people being able to take so many flyers, because you'd only be able to take a maximum of one air wing detachment and one auxiliary, which would give you 6 flyers. That one I don't like so much, because I don't think it does enough, and I think it impacts other armies a little bit hard. So, I mean, being able to take 6 Storm Ravens is not really anything worse than the army already is. So that's kind of a problem. And then there's some other things being floated around, like some of the ITC guys are talking about, like giving people unique stratagems for tournaments that work better against flyers, making it so that you get extra like kill points or victory points or what have you if you kill more than a few of the same things. So let's say I brought 8 of the same unit, and you kill one of them, you get the normal amount of points, but then you kill the second one, you get 2 kill points for that instead of 1. You kill the third, you get 3 kill points for that instead of 2, etc., etc. Personally, I don't think any of these are going to work, except for restricting the amount of a particular data sheet that you can bring, and I don't think troops can be exempted either. I think there needs to be a cap of like 5 or 6 on troops instead of 3, because if you do any lower, you're really hurting armies that like aren't super broken. Like my orcs are not a broken list at all, and I take 6 troop choices of boys. And then like IG would be hit pretty hard if you wanted to run a bunch of infantry squads, something like that. I mean, 6 infantry squads is not that many guys, especially for a foot IG army. But taking no more than 3 of anything else is pretty reasonable. It doesn't hit any of the elite armies really at all. They normally don't take more than 1 or 2 of something when they're building a normal non-spam list, but it would invalidate something like the Tau list I played, where I can't take 10 commanders anymore. I'd have to take 3 commanders and then put the rest into suits or something like that. While that would be a bummer to kind of lose out on the army that I bought, I'm okay with it, because I think that 40K is in a good place right now, but it has a problem with spam, and it's always had a problem with spam. Every game that I've ever played for miniatures has a problem with spam. War Machine has had huge problems with spam for years. 40K has always had problems with it ever since I played. Fantasy always had problems with it. Age of Sigmar has problems with it right now. I've played like historicals and shit like that, where you wouldn't even think people care about competitive play, but they do, and spam is how you do it. The only game that really gets around it that I know of is like X-Wing, because you have like 3 models, so you can't spam. And I think one of the armies that used to be good was like TIE Fighter spam anyways, but that's neither here nor there. So that's what I would like to see, is the curtailing of just being able to take X amount of this one thing because it's slightly undercosted, or it's really good for the points, or whatever. That's what's really kind of holding the game back from being awesome right now. It would be great if GW had saw fit to put something like that in there, but they're never going to do that, because one, GW doesn't care about the competitive side of the game. They never have, they never will, they don't need to. It's a very niche amount of the players overall, and it would affect their sales. That's like, people say that as a I guess like a conspiracy theory thing, but it's true. I mean, there's a lot of people out there in the world right now who are buying 5+ Storm Ravens because they see the list is doing well and they want to win. Some people just want to win, and it doesn't matter how they get there. And that's fine. That's a perfectly valid attitude to have. But GW is like, oh, okay, you want to buy, 10 of this one thing, 5 of this one thing. Cool, here, we'll take your money. That's no big deal. So it's kind of on the prominent community figures to say, okay, that's not all right. We're going to put some rules in place, and then those will trickle down. Because what happens is, when all the big tournaments start running the same rule set, as far as, you can't do this or you can't do that, it then trickles down to the guys that run events at the local level, and then when the locals start getting hit by it, people just naturally play that way anyways, because, oh, I don't want to play in a way or with a list that I can't take to my local rogue trader or something like that. So it takes a while, but it does end up like fixing the game. You can kind of already see that with the ITC missions and the Nova missions and all that stuff like proliferating. throughout the internet. People aren't worrying as much about like how many drops you have and things like that anymore, which they originally were when 8th edition came out. You can build armies that are a little bit bigger. You can build MSU if you want, and you don't have to worry about always going second pretty much and just getting blown off the table or whatever. Those are good things. So yeah, how my list fits into that is it probably wouldn't work in such an environment. That's fine with me. I like Tao's playstyle a lot, and I'm okay with having an army of them that maybe I can grow and maybe will improve when they get a codex, because they do need some love as far as just having other options available, other builds, things like that. So it would be definitely a worthy sacrifice to have the game be in a better state. And I do think that the Tau Commander list is probably pretty dumb. I mean, it's just, it's not boring to play. It is a spam list, and I do generally find spam lists boring, but it's not as point and click as the other lists are. Like, you can see if you look at the battle reports I've done, I'm doing a lot of shooting and deleting things, obviously, but there's like a lot of positional mistakes I'm making every game and things like that, which could be, which can make me a better player and make me use the army more effectively. And I do, like in this game, I lost a lot of commanders. I lost a lot of stuff. So that was definitely like a little bit of a wake-up call. Whereas if I was playing something like 5+ Storm Ravens, positioning is irrelevant. Like, I just need to put them all in range of whatever auras I'm bringing and shoot my opponent off the table. It's not, there's no interest there as far as like it being exciting for anybody else or like really learning or anything. It's like, oh, what mistakes did you make? Well, I either moved my guys outside of my auras because I'm an idiot, or I shot the wrong things with the wrong guns because I guess I'm an idiot in that as well. Like, that's just math. So those are pretty much the only 2 mistakes you can ever make with that army. That's not very interesting to me. It's not very tactical. So I will gladly sacrifice my army to have those things be taken out of the game over time. So yeah, that's my stance on that. I'll probably be playing the Tau army a little bit more. I'm gonna probably make a toned down version of it to play in the league and things like that. I do want to get more practice in with it until I see where any comp may or may not be going. I'm also working on an Imperial Guard army using my orcs. I used to play an orc Imperial Guard army back in 5th edition, which was all orc models and then IG vehicles that were like looted with bits and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and resurrect that idea. I have a pretty awesome idea for an Imperial Guard army that would work well in any comp. So it doesn't spam more than one, or it doesn't use more than one of the same detachment. It doesn't use more than 3 of the same thing, period. And I think it's a really powerful army that would be also fun to play against, but it's going to take a while to build because it has a lot of Lehman Russes. So once I get that probably done in maybe like 2 weeks from this date or something, we'll be doing some of that as well. So everybody out there who loves orcs, you will get to see some orcs. They will just be shooting las guns and battle cannons, which is, I mean, it's close enough. So yeah, thanks for checking out one of my videos. As always, please feel free to leave me any comments or anything. I do always respond to them, and see you next time.